What's going on, everyone? It's Mr. West. I hope we're all well. So welcome back to another in the ultimate video test series, and this time is for the Samsung Galaxy S10e. Now if you are thinking about buying a Samsung Galaxy S10 or the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus, the main video recording abilities are identical across all of the phones in the range. So what you see in this video is what you'll also see on the S10 and the S10 Plus, so I suppose you could say it counts for all of those as well. Now, as with all video tests, all of the main camera specifications will be left down in the description, so you can go read through those in your own time. And throughout the video I'll just run through the high-level specifications of both the front and rear camera and tell you what it's all about. So the front-facing camera, let's start off with that. It's a 10 megapixel autofocus camera. It's dual pixel phase detection autofocus. It has electronic image stabilization, and we're currently in 1080p, but it also records at 720p and also 4K at frame rate of up to 30 frames per second. Now, from both the front and rear cameras, the phone does record in stereo sound. It's got active noise cancellation, it's got two microphones, one at either end of the handset, and it does record nice, wide, rich stereo sound. And the noise cancellation, well, I can't vouch for that. It's quite windy up by here, but you be the judge and you let me know down in the comments. So looking behind me there, it is overexposing the clouds and blowing those out, so as I move the handset around, here we go, we can see we just got the blue sky returning there, but as we move back, so the sun is setting just over here. That is causing some issues with the front-facing sensor. So as with all video tests, let's go for a quick run and we'll check out the stabilization. Now, one thing I will say is that when you're looking in the viewfinder, it is wobbling all over the place. However, just be aware that the stabilization is doing its work in the background, and the resulting video when played back will be nice and smooth. Okay, so now we're recording a 4K at 30 frames per second from the front-facing camera, and just like 1080p, it benefits from electronic image stabilization. So let's just check around detail around the scene here. So around here we're retaining colour and detail and nice contrast in the sky behind, but the closer then we move to my face, we can see that it starts to overexpose and the sky then gets blown out. So that is how things look from the front facing camera, both 1080p 30 and at 4K at 30 frames per second. Alright, so starting with 1080p at 30 frames per second from the rear facing cameras. So the Galaxy S10e has two 12 megapixel rear facing cameras. The first, which is a wide angle lens, which is the one we're looking through at the moment, that has automatic HDR, also features HDR10 video recording, which is what we're recording in now. I will explain some of the emissions in the different frame rates in a moment. This also has dual phase detection autofocus, and it adjusts for exposure and everything else on the fly. Now, the rule of thumb with all of the Galaxy S10 range is that anything in 30 frames per second, you can use the wide angle cameras and HDR10 video recording. When you move up to 60 frames per second, you lose support for the ultra wide angle lens, which I'll show you in a moment, and also HDR10 processing. So that is something you need to bear in mind. We'll just show you the wide angle lens. Now you can switch this on the fly, so to speak. Now, unlike the Huawei Mate 20 Pro and also some LG handsets, there is a notable pause as it moves between the wide and ultra wide angle camera. Now, the Galaxy S10e doesn't have the telephoto lens from the S10 and S10 Plus. However, it's only ×2 and you're not really missing a huge amount because you can just crop in anyway and you still get more or less the same kind of detail. So I'll show you the wide angle lens and just show you just how much the ultra wide angle lens can capture. So here we go, and there we are. So you can see you get a much wider field of view, much more dramatic. Now the ultra wide angle lens isn't autofocus, so it's a fixed focus lens, so you do need to be careful with framing. Now the extremities of the ultra wide angle lens, they are in photo mode, but they are a bit fisheye. You can correct that with the built-in software in the gallery. So let's go back to the standard wide angle lens and we'll show you the stabilization. Just to let you know, the electronic image stabilization is supported at all resolutions up to 4K at 30 frames per second. And then at 4K 60 frames per second, it then switches back to standard optical image stabilization. Now you can see just how much you get in the frame in a wide angle camera mode. It's pretty impressive. Okay, so this is 1080p at 60 frames per second. Now the 60 FPS video recording on pretty much all Samsung phones from the S8 onwards is absolutely bananas. It is super smooth. I mean, there are a couple of tiny drop frames now and again, but it does give you a much more fluid sense of movement. You can just see the auto exposure doing its work as I move around different parts of the image there, and it just corrects itself when it finds brighter points. You can see on the trees here. Now I'm seeing pure greens, but it is compensating to allow more light into the sensor. So we'll just show you the stabilization now at 60 frames per second. This is electronic. Alright, so this is called super steady video mode. Now this is what Samsung says to give the S10e, S10 and S10 Plus a more GoPro style hyper smooth stabilization. Now I have used this a few times and it is really good. You could probably use this as your main video mode if you really didn't care about 4K video, because it is really impressive. And you can see in this mode that you still get that great contrast and great exposure across the whole image. Now this records at 1080p at 30 frames per second. Now what that does, it uses all of the spare frames around the image to get you the super smooth stabilization. That does mean you get a much heavier crop. Okay, so we'll go for a run and we'll show you the super steady mode now and show you how well the stabilization works in this mode. So there we go, that's the super steady mode. You let me know what you think down in the comments. Okay, so before we go any further, let's just test out the autofocus. I've got the car key fob. So it's got a nice smooth transition. Now you do have to get quite close to the camera lens, I've noticed with this. So you go back here, sort of sets preference to the background, whereas if I come a bit closer, you can see you get a nice sharp autofocus, and the movement between the in focus and then back to the background is nice and smooth. You haven't kind of got that snap where the lens just quickly goes back to focus on the distance. Okay, so now 4K at 30 frames per second. As I said at the start of the video, in this mode you get electronic image stabilization, HDR10 plus support, which is what we're recording in now, and you also get use of the ultra wide angle lens as well. So that's 4K ultra wide with HDR10. Even if you haven't got a HDR10 plus display, you should be getting the benefit of the super pumped up colours and wider dynamic range. If we look straight into the sun, we don't get any blowout in the lens, but still a really super image. That's this year's Christmas trees growing in the background. So back to wide angle. There we go. Now you can see a slight difference between the two lenses, as I said before. Now the one great thing is you get this nice depth of field to the video as well, which is great. Alright, so this is 4K at 60 frames per second. Now in this mode you do lose electronic image stabilization, and it just defaults back to optical stabilization from the main rear sensor. So you get a little bit more wobble in footsteps, and you also lose HDR10 plus processing in this mode, but you do get some slightly smoother movement in the process. Great for recording much faster moving video, for example sports, concerts. I mean, look at that, that is really awesome. A great backdrop, and the phone is handling that really, really well. And staying right out over into the valley. And if we just look how it handles the exposure in the sky, almost exactly the same all of the way around. Really impressive. Although we lose the stabilization, you could always use a gimbal if needs must. So I'll show you now how the optical stabilization copes with 4K 60 video. So as you can tell, there's quite a difference there from the butter smooth electronic stabilization. But as I said, you could always put the S10e or your S10, S10 Plus into a gimbal and help smoothen out the bumps. But it is nice to have really sharp, smooth 60 frames per second 4K video. As always, I've recorded some segments just driving up here just to show you how smooth it is. There are a tiny amount of drop frames, but nothing major. So that is 4K at 60 frames per second. So that's the end of the Galaxy S10e ultimate video test. I hope you enjoyed it. There's a lot to go through, but I think it's an extremely impressive performer in regards to video recording. So it's got a great camera as well. Now it does need a few software nips and tucks, I think, to be a truly great camera. So it's great, but not truly great, if you get what I mean. But video recording wise, it is first class. It is just like its older brothers, the S9, the Note 9, the S9 Plus, even the S8 that had fantastic video recording. And this is no exception. Absolutely tremendous image quality, nice and sharp, loads of colour, especially with that HDR10 video. But anyway, you let me know what you think. That's just my opinion of it. This is for you, the viewers, and you let me know down in the comments what you think of the video quality from the Samsung Galaxy S10e. Now, don't forget, if you're new here, please consider subscribing so you don't miss more videos on the channel coming very soon, including more ultimate video tests. So we'll be covering the Huawei P30 Pro. I'm quite eager to test that to see if Huawei have improved the video quality. But apart from that, this is everything for the Galaxy S10e ultimate video test. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I will catch you guys later.